Yeah, China is interesting because it's also got a highly dispersed. Their population is much more dispersed than Japan, which is all quite. Their population density is much higher, so there's quite different things there. But let's go back to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just pick one of those things that you talked about. And I think robotics is a really interesting one, because when the Japanese have looked at robots, they've certainly gone full on into how can robotics help us care for the elderly?
Right.
How can they both act as assistants to move people around, but perhaps more interestingly is that problem of loneliness. As people get older, their family may be distant from them. They may lose their friends. So they're also looking at robotics and saying, well, how can we present them in a lifelike state, or either in a human form, or might even be in a pet, looking at like a pet, to give the emotional comfort as well.
Okay.
So I think the Japanese haven't just looked at the physical needs, but they're looking at the social and psychological needs, and that's really that can be very rich. And there's an interesting thing about robots and Japan to contrast in the media, where in the West we tend to associate. In the past, we've had this idea of associating robots with threats and evil and turning around and doing bad things. Right. The Terminator, for example. So there's been a negative idea about them, whereas the Japanese have always had a much more positive presentation of robots. So they're not as stigmatized,
right,
in being presented to people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's.
And I think that's also part of the religion too, right? Because I forget the name of the dominant.
Is it Shinto? Shinto?
Yeah, Shinto. In Shintoism, where even inanimate objects or animals or what have you, they can have souls or something of that nature. So I think that's one of the reasons why Japanese have such a higher degree of comfort with robots and artificial intelligence, because based on their culture, their background, they have an easier time thinking of artificial intelligence and robots as equal to themselves in terms of life forms.
Yeah. So that is that collision. And that's actually, you touched on something good there. The idea that robotics is paired with artificial intelligence, because it's robotics. Robot is the manifestation of a physical independent thing, but then the development of artificial intelligence allows it to actually do things and react. So rather than just be a bunch of instructions being executed, artificial intelligence has the potential to add personality and to become blended to support to individuals. So there's interesting crossovers there.